So before we go to our first track on new mindsets and hear from the brilliant Sir Ronnie Cohen, we'll take a step back and look at how we can address global social inequality, an ever more pressing issue and one that plays an important role in the path to a sustainable future. On Wednesday this week, a group of internationally acclaimed experts gathered to develop a set of recommendations to tackle global social inequality. Molly Fannon, CEO of UN Live, took part in the meeting and will share with us in a minute the takeaways that the group has outlined as a roadmap for future action for decision makers and the business community, a sort of a roadmap, if you like. Molly's role at UN Live is to act as a lightning rod to promote the values of the United Nations and to drive up global engagement to achieve these values. So please do welcome the brilliant and rather dazzling Molly Fannon to the stage. Thank you so much.
Dazzling. That's a fun way to begin things. So thank you, Carolina, and thank you for the entire Tomorrow staff for the welcome and the opportunity to join you today to be a part of Wednesday's incredible and fascinating program and to join with you this morning on what I'm sure will be a really illuminating day. Thank you for using, Carolina, especially your own superpowers to convene all of us and help us all reflect, engage, and take action. So these lights are strong. I can't see really well into the audience, but I always like to know who I'm talking to. So Carolina spoke about the need to change our own behaviors around food, around transportation, around housing, as concrete examples about how we change the world for climate. How many in this room, raise your hand and feel free to be honest, think about climate change on a daily basis? Okay, we'll come back to that. So when Ban Ki-moon announced the Sustainable Development Goals, I've worked across all 17 Sustainable Development Goals in more than 40 countries of the world, predominantly, almost exclusively in the Global South. This quote was perhaps the most important quote when he released this new agenda, and it is the center, very wisely, to this Tomorrow Festival. We are the first generation that can put an end to poverty and the last that can avoid the worst effects of climate change. I don't know if I got that entirely right. It holds so much power because it doesn't diminish the situation that we're all facing, that all of you just rose your hand and said you wake up and you think about on the same day, every morning. As stated with one of my co-participants on Wednesday, Jim Snebe, he actually considers himself a concerned optimist. He's concerned because he's convinced that we need dramatic acceleration. We've got to move faster. But in his view, the good news that we see in the IPCC report, and frankly what scientists have been saying for 30 plus years, is that climate change is caused by humans. So that's what makes us able to overcome it. That was the outset of our action tank, not a think tank. We were tasked with identifying concrete actions to fight social inequality and climate change. But what really is climate justice? It's really an issue that demands that we step outside of our own place in this world, that we step outside and we put ourselves in the shoes and lives of other people to understand profoundly, not just in our heads, not just in our hearts, but in our actions, profoundly their situation enough for us to take action. It actually demands climate justice that each and every one of us in this tent today thinks differently about who we are as people and to whom we belong. Because we belong to a global community, and what I would propose we need more than anything else right now is a renewed sense of a global we, that we are in this together, that we're all in the same boat, and that it's only by acting together that we're going to be able to solve any challenges. So my task was to sum up 5 hours of brilliant thinking in 15 minutes, so bear with me. Catherine Richardson, who is on the Secretary General's climate science task force for the entire SDGs, she claims, of course, Earth's resources are finite, but our imagination is not. Business as usual will not cut it anymore. As Kate Fletcher, one of the leading thinkers in the fashion industry, said, she said, you know what, saving the planet, even when it causes anger and frustration and hard work, that's what's necessary. And we're not naive about it, because business as usual right now is simply illogical. Business won't work if the world's on fire, or if you read the New York Times this morning, if it's underwater in New York City. We have to fully shift our approach in how we think about our role, and we have to be radically innovative and bold. So yes, Catherine said our imagination is not finite like the Earth's resources. Sally, a psychologist, talked about this climate bubble that none of you are in, so good for you. None of you are in, is by far the most dangerous in human history. It's like living in her words, planet Lala. And she said that as people exit the climate bubble and they wake up to the reality of the situation we're all facing, many of us, raise your hand if you feel this, please be vulnerable enough to admit it, feel a sense of eco-anxiety, fear, worry, especially if you have kids, fear, worry. Well, actually, the good news is that's a sign that you're mentally healthy, because eco-anxiety is what we all need to move in the direction of life force and solving problems. It's actually what we need to say, I'm a human being, I'm afraid, and therefore I'm going to make a change. So that's actually something that works in our favor. Melanie Joy really talked about one of the things that we need to radically break when we use our imaginations is this completely false perception that we exist alone on this planet, right? If we're going to have a truly global we have to think of that global we in the broadest sense possible, across geographic divides, that's what I've spent my life doing, across generational divides, that's now what I'm spending my energy doing, even across species. We all exist on this planet together, and we all need each other together. It is not an exaggeration to say that if a species of an ant goes extinct, the ripples across ecosystems are immense. The pandemics that we're currently experiencing will only increase with climate change because we depend upon and are uniquely tied to the species of Earth. So in this wild reimagination of how we fit within the larger ecosystem, Loretta Napoleoni said, we have to conquer fear, and we have to jump into the unknown empowered by imagination. Even, in Loretta's perspective, if that means jumping to space, to Mars, which might seem like science fiction, but she assured us that so too maybe did the Easter Island sculptures thousands of years ago. I wish my dad had known what to do. One of the speakers came to us from Uganda, Naombi. He worked so hard to speak that he actually had to borrow a laptop from someone in his community and really wanted to be here with us today. And he explained that in his rural village in Uganda, where he grew up, in a farming community, Chinese mining companies had come up and they had caused so much damage that flooding across Lake Victoria was causing his family to literally, in the day and at night especially, hold his house together, I kid you not, with teaspoons and bowls, until finally his house washed away, his farm washed away, and they were forced, like many families all over the world, to become urban dwellers and to move to Kampala. And his dad, in desperation, left the family and left him with a single parent. So Naomi picked himself up by the bootstraps that Obama is famous for saying, when you pick yourself up by bootstraps and you don't even have boots. That's what a lot of people in this world are capable of doing and what we need to harness. And he took it upon himself to fight for climate education. Because if we don't have climate education in schools, if we don't educate people on what it means, what climate change means, and empower them with a sense of their own agency, what he said is, we're going to have more people like my dad who simply didn't know what to do, right? That was echoed by who I've been explained only after the fact, of course, Rune, one of the public intellectuals in Denmark, who you all, I'm sure, know. Denmark's a very small country, I'm coming to learn, compared to my home country of the United States. That in order to make a green and just transition, we have to listen to, and I would say include, voices across class divides. And the only way to do that is for those of us in this room who wake up every day and think about climate, and who have the opportunity and, frankly, the, what's the right word? I'm going on very little sleep. The opportunity and the privilege to be amongst one another, to break out of our comfortable academic discourse of climate, and to make it radically accessible to people who are not invited to these sorts of events, to make it absolutely central to their own lives. I've spent my life working across international development, and I've always had a hunch that culture can and should play a role in any major global issue. That's what I did for the Smithsonian Institution before moving over here to Denmark. And my belief is, luckily enough, being backed by science, and so that's what UN Live is now doing, is merging the fields of behavioral insights with mass culture to communicate what science has been telling us is the how, maybe the why, but to actually have people care enough to act, and to communicate it in ways across Bollywood or electronic dance music in Latin America, to drive massive action by using mass culture, to inspire people to wake up, whether on the dance floor or while they're binge watching a climate thriller, to a sense of curiosity and passion. Because we can't rely on what we have to admit has not worked. We've been preaching the facts, we've been preaching doom and gloom. We have to say what is working. Science shows us, and human psychology shows us, that optimism and hearing optimistic stories drives more optimism and more optimistic ideas. And luckily, on Wednesday, we were full of them. Why do we need to share concrete solutions for climate justice? One, time is not on our side right now. We need to get stuff done. We can't wait. Two, we have to change the conversation so that we can exponentially drive the number of people who are working to do this. So whether it was Anshu's amazing story about how the oceans inhabit 90% of the Earth's living space and can capture more than 20% of carbon. And if we think about algae, a species as small and maybe we think irrelevant as algae, it might have gotten in the way of some of your summer bathing a few weeks ago when it was so warm here in Copenhagen that the algae grew and we couldn't go swimming. I don't know if any of you else experienced that. That algae can replace plastics, that algae can increase the power of the oceans to sequester carbon, that we need to exploit the power of Earth's resources. Actually, after her talk, what I loved the most was that Torben, the CEO of one of the largest pension funds here in Denmark, his first reaction in the breakout group was, well, in my next life, I'm going to be an oceanographer. Or as Thies and Clara, who both work in restoring ecosystems, one in Central America and one in the Sinai, are showing, is that when we restore ecosystems, we not only restore the ecosystems and deal with issues like heat, like drought, like climate and weather, but we change people's entire livelihoods, right? We can change people's ability to make a living and to have hope moving into the future. Mushfiq, who works across the world but comes from at least half Bangladesh, half Cayman Islands, he spoke about the amazing success he's had dealing with a very real issue in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America and South and Southeast Asia, which is seasonal hunger. So people go hungry when it's drought season. So what do you do about that? Optimistic stories don't have to be rocket science. He built a coalition based on his passion around seasonal hunger and came up with basically what is a very pragmatic solution. Let's figure out how to bus people in the dry seasons to Dhaka, where they can drive rickshaws and lay bricks. And by doing so, increase the caloric intake of every member of their family by 600 calories per day and end seasonal hunger. We need pragmatic solutions. We need to share these boldly. That's all of our jobs. We can't just talk about everything that's going wrong. We have to talk about what's going right. We also need leadership. Solomon's in this room. Solomon, I hope I quoted you correctly. Hi there. This is what I loved about Solomon. I loved everything that Solomon said. Leadership is what is needed, he said. Action that can scale fast. Find the chutzpah and make it happen. We have the solutions, Jim Snebe said. We have the solutions. We need the leadership to be ambitious, to have the courage to dream big, to form partnerships, and share. That same Torben, who leads one of the largest pension funds here in Denmark, definitely said, formal leadership has a role to play. And he stands ready with his own pension fund and with an alliance of private investors to say, no good idea in a green transition will get stuck. That is my vision, to unleash private investment into all good ideas. But Rune said, you know what? Formal leadership is not going to be enough. The problems we face are simply too large and too complex. And he actually said, the devil himself couldn't have come up with a worse problem than climate for humanity, because our politics are slow, but the acceleration of climate is fast, and it's getting faster. So we can't rely on traditional forms of politics. Naombi from Uganda, he said that very clearly. He was like, you know what? If I wait for the politicians in Uganda to do something about this, it's never going to happen. If I had waited as a leader in the United States, especially prior to this administration, for something to happen, nothing would have happened. We all need to step into our own leadership, because formal leadership is not enough. When Jim described his categories of leadership, he said, yes, we need politicians who set the policy and build the infrastructure. We need businesses that are going to take the risks and they're going to make the investments, and we need the consumers, and that's all of us, who are going to change the way we eat, the way we fly, the way we insulate our homes, the way we vote. We need people like Solomon, who became a climate activist at the age of 11 and is working on a large scale and ambitious power around nuclear power, because he says, you know what? It simply takes someone to start it. Young people are deciding to be courageous. And Prince Zaid, the former UN Commissioner for Human Rights, said, you know what? There are a lot of problems that formal leaders say are just too hard to deal with. Climate mitigation for the poorest countries being among the top at that list. So he called to all of you, young people in particular, but I'm going to say, I love it in Denmark that you're not considered old until you're really old. That's very different than in the United States. So I'm going to count on all of you as young. I'm calling on you, especially the young, to be courageous, to take up the baton and to step into the arena, as it were. And when Rune was summing up my own presentation, what he actually said was, well, what I took away from that was that science is indicating that now children are the ones who are raising their parents. So I can attest to that. I am CEO of the Museum for, not about, the United Nations. It's a very important distinction. I'm also the mom to these 3 amazing girls who keep me very busy. And as of 11 weeks, and now 5, 2 days ago was 3, 5 days and no meals ago because I haven't had breakfast yet, not that I'm counting, I am vegetarian and increasingly vegan. And the reason for that is that my oldest daughter, 11 months ago, decided that she was going to begin a lifelong, these are her words, a lifelong quest, she's 10, to save the earth and the animals. Mom, we have to change the way we eat as a family. I am not eating meat ever again. I am not eating anything that comes from animals. And I don't want you to either. So in an act of solidarity with my child, I now actually am not eating meat anymore, and I'm increasingly not eating anything that comes from animals. She is teaching me, and the science is showing that children as young as 10 actually might have unprecedented power to swing the ideas of their parents. And in my home country, the jump in the swing of level of concern about climate, you all are concerned, but a lot of people in the United States are not, and that's a big problem. A lot of people that are not, that's a big problem in the United States, are male and conservative. The biggest jump in levels of concern, especially when it was their daughters, not their sons, their daughters who were 10 who talked to them, was with male and conservative dads. I moved from an amazing job in Washington, D.C., an amazing career, to join you here in Denmark, and I have not looked back, right? But when we were getting ready to move here, my oldest, who's 10 and then was 7.5, said, Mom, really, do we have to go? I like my friends. Do we have to go? Yeah, Pumpkin, we have to go. But your job is about fixing climate change, right? And so give me some grace, because there's only a few more, I think now months, not years, when I can be a hero in this kid's story. And so I said, yeah, sweetie, my job's to fix climate. And in her not unique, but childlike way, she said, okay, great. So when you're done with that, what's next? That's what we have to be aiming for. What's next? How can we act so boldly, with such ambition, with such open arms for who can be a leader and who can bring about solutions, that we have the luxury of answering her question, which I would say is a universal question. So thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you for the Tomorrow Festival. I am very humbled to be amongst you and still buzzing with the ideas, obviously, that I got on Wednesday, and look forward to hearing more. Thank you very much.